Mayor de Blasio, First Lady Chirlane Mccray, Commissioner Tom Finkelpearl of New York City Cultural Affairs, DLCA, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Today is a special day for the artistic community of New York City. I am proud and honored to share with you that I am a native deaf New Yorker with a great passion for arts and culture, mainly in thanks to being exposed to predominantly artistic and visual environment while growing up. As a deaf individual, I heavily depended on my eyes as an avenue of processing the world around me, particularly when I went to parks, museums, theaters, festivals, and partook in recreational activities with my family, friends, and deaf school groups. My engagement in these activities led to my blossoming career, which includes serving as a docent at the Met and Rubin Museum of Arts, and a teaching assistant at the Theater Development Fund, and a social media specialist for Hands On, a nonprofit organization that is committed to providing cultural programs for deaf and hard of hearing individuals. In conjunction with this, I help to orchestrate and perform American Sign Language interpreted performance on Broadway and serve as an executive producer of the comedy web series Don't Shoot the Messenger. I'm also a performing artist, performing at the Highline Park, Shakespeare in the Park in Central Park, and most recently, my acting career has been burgeoning with performances in the Netflix original comedy series Master of None, Season 2, Episode 6, New York, I Love You. I also serve as a proud member of SAG-AFTRA, New York Women in Film and TV, and the Independent Filmmaker Project. I have been involved in the artistic advocacy group Disability Arts New York City Task Force, which is led by Simon Linton and Kevin Gotkin. We collaborate to conduct research and offer proposals to DLCA for the cultural plan and are eager to continue moving forward. Our recommendations strive to instill the important and novel practices of diversity, inclusion, and equality embedded in the New York City Cultural Plan. Create New York City for our artists with disabilities. Our mission's motto is nothing about us without us. We have high hopes for New York City's ability to provide equal access in regards to arts and culture, such that our great city can attain a universal design where individuals can experience and appreciate the arts equally. Just so you get a sense of the urgency of cultural access for people with disabilities, it is estimated that roughly 10% of New Yorkers have a disability. Their disability does not define them, but it does pose physical barriers to their participation. With this statistic in mind, our proposal for universal design does in fact provide full accommodations access to everyone, including closed captioning on screens everywhere, highly qualified and certified sign language interpreters, as well as foreign language interpreters who do justice to the beautiful diversity of cultures that our city has to offer. Lastly, this plan envisions ramps that are wheelchair accessible, so folks with wheelchairs can have equal access to the city's art scene without wondering whether their wheelchair will be a hurdle to their enjoyment. We look forward to working with the city to implement these changes so that all New Yorkers can reap the benefits of the city's prominent art scene. My personal experiences inspire me to help others through actions. And with your support, this dream becomes a reality. Thank you so much, Mayor de Blasio, for initiating this great plan forward. And now, I would like to introduce First Lady Chirlane Mccray.
Thank you, my lady. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am so delighted to be here today. Isn't this place amazing? It really is. Yes. I can't believe we're having a press conference in a treasure chest. This place is a huge supplier for all of our New York City public schools, from art supplies to furniture and everything else in between. Materials for the arts just provide so much for our New York City public schools, and I know we make a lot of nonprofits and others happy as well. I really just want to stay here and play because they have so much for everyone to be able to create, and many of the materials are materials that would have been thrown away. So I thank this institution and know that we've got to do everything we can to support them. So I just want to tell you a little story to show my why I have so much passion for the arts and culture in New York City. When I first moved to New York City from Massachusetts 40 years ago, I was truly in awe of this place. All of the streets seemed alive with the energy of individual and group expressions, from the Midtown March to work in astonishing conformity to the saffron robes and hypnotic chanting of the Hare Krishna devotees. Murals bloomed in unexpected places, and graffiti blazed in red, black, and blue electric across the sides of buildings. Brown boys sleeped and spun and made poetry with their bodies on the subway and sidewalks, with boom boxes booming. And in every borough, every neighborhood had its own signature rhythm and theater. And for me, all of this was completely new and completely exciting. I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, which, let's face it, is not exactly a cultural hotbed. But thanks to loving and hardworking parents, I was exposed to the arts at an early age, with piano lessons and glee club at school. And then at the Dunbar Community Center, I was chosen to be a Frank Hatchet dancer. Now, believe me, this was a big deal. Frank Hatchet would later go on to help launch the Broadway Dance Center here in New York. But before then, with Frank's guidance, in Springfield, we learned jazz, African, and many other styles of dance. And though we learned dance history and how to tell our own stories with movement, most important for me was the feeling of ties with a community. By then, my family had moved to a suburb of Springfield where I was the only black student in my class, and that sense of community just wasn't there. The Hatchet dancers and all of Frank's students, ranging from the tiny 3-year-olds in candy-colored leotards to the slower-moving seniors and retirees, worked hard, and every year or so he would put on this grand recital. And for this to be successful, everyone had to pitch in, not just the families of the performers. And those recitals would go on for hours and hours and hours, but the auditorium would be packed all weekend. And this little story about my dancing days illustrates just one of the many reasons why art is so important, why it matters. It has so much power to bring in people together, to give individuals a chance to be part of something that's bigger than them. People of all abilities, and I mean physical and mental. And who can imagine a world without art? I certainly can't. Art is therapeutic and healing. If I could not write poetry or sing or dance when I was growing up, I probably would not be sitting here today. It is such a safe vehicle for difficult emotions. And where would we all be if we didn't have that potent mix of art and activism to help transform people's politics and their relationship with the world around them? Now, we know that arts and culture matter to New Yorkers. A recent poll reports that, well, we study everything. A recent poll reports that 97% of New Yorkers value arts and culture. Can you believe that? It's probably the only thing that all New Yorkers agree about. Unfortunately, not all of our residents have the opportunity to fully experience the cultural life of our city or to be leaders and shapers of our cultural institutions. And very few artists without means have the support they need to do their work or be successful at it. So much talent is lost, and when talent is not nurtured, it is not only those individual artists who lose, we all lose. The man by my side works very hard every day to make sure that the arts in New York are for everyone. And I am so proud to work with him, our mayor, Bill de Blasio.
Thank you so much, Chirlane. I have to say, over the years, I've heard the stories that you just got a glimpse of. And for Chirlane, why all of those experiences, really were life-saving. They allowed her to have strength, even when she was experiencing discrimination or exclusion, and allowed her to believe in her own power and her own potential. So I've always been moved to understand that poetry for her and dance for her, music for her, were ways of interpreting the world, even if the world around her sometimes seemed hostile. And they gave her strength and allowed her to bring out everything she had in her. And that's true for millions and millions of people in this city. And this is why today is so important. It's about literally allowing each person to realize their full potential and to be able to express their identity. That's the power of what we're talking about today. So thank you, Chirlane, for all you do every day in this work, but all you've done in your life in pursuit of that goal for everyone. And I want to thank some of my colleagues are here. You're going to hear from some of my colleagues in a moment, but I'd also like, whoa, there's another note I've been handed. I'd like to also thank, first of all, a lot of energy went into putting together the plan we're going to talk about today, including from some of the folks here, but I want to thank our first Deputy Mayor, Tony Choris, for his hard work on this plan. And I want to thank our Commissioner for the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, Victor Calisi, for his great work. Yes, you can clap for him. We are joined by one of the great philanthropists in this city who has devoted herself to the connection between arts and education and making sure that children of every walk of life, every income, every background had the maximum opportunity to experience the arts. And she's been a leader in convincing the cultural world to focus on reaching all of our children in all of our communities. Agnes Gund, thank you so much. I want to thank, you'll hear from council members Jimmy Van Bramer and Steve Levin, but I want to thank them up front for the legislation that they sponsored that made such a big difference here in realizing this inclusive vision of the arts. And for the folks who preceded Chirlane and I, first of all, if you want to wake up in the morning in Queens and have a great day, just ask the Korean traditional marching band to start your day. So let's thank them for their great work. And I also have to say to Melanie Chaitu, thank you. Thank you for your extraordinary remarks. They meant a lot to everyone here. And Melanie is a classic New Yorker. She's involved in everything simultaneously. She is an overachiever. She has 24-hour energy, but she's a great example to us all. Thank you, Melanie. So Chirlane referenced the survey we did. 97% of New Yorkers acknowledging how important arts and culture are to them. And I'm going to interpret that another way. We're very proud as New Yorkers. We believe this is the greatest city in the world. Who here believes this is the greatest city in the world? Okay? And one of the reasons we are most proud is the cultural institutions and organizations that we have here. We know we're the home to some of the most famous, most renowned arts organizations and dance troupes and museums, you name it. But we also know in every community, as Chirlane talked about, there are less well-known but equally wonderful arts organizations and grassroots arts groups doing amazing work. We know talent resides in every corner of the city. So when people talk about their pride, that pride may be in a great museum or a great ballet. It could be in a great local organization that comes to their school and helps their kids experience the arts. But either way you slice it, for New Yorkers, this is part of our identity. Now, every city has their artists, but here, artists are so front and center in the life of our city. And all the amazing people who came from here, we celebrate. The forms of music created here. Hip-hop was created here. Salsa was created here. The things that grew in New York City make us especially proud. So it's who we are as New Yorkers to believe that arts and culture are in the front of our lives. I also would say that I think we inherently believe in the power of arts and culture, not just because it expresses who we are and we're the most diverse place on earth, and it's important that every part of the community express its culture, its history, but also its views. And this is the other part of the equation. New York City, throughout its history, has been a place that valued free speech and understood there would be differences of opinion, as Chirlane referenced before. Differences of opinion that's a New York thing. If ever I knew one. 8.5 million people with 8.5 million different opinions. But we believe in democracy here. We always have. And arts and culture, the freedom and strength of the cultural community aligns directly to the strength of our democracy. And this is an important moment in history to remember that. A lot of times when there's controversy, and particularly when some communities are being ostracized, the counter effort, the effort to remind people about our common humanity comes from the cultural sector, right? Many, many times when you've seen discrimination and unfairness, cultural sector was in the vanguard of speaking up and portraying why that was wrong. And we know that in any museum, in any concert hall, any place you go in the cultural world, you're going to see that freedom, that openness to all viewpoints. And a lot of times the cultural community is our conscience to remind us not to let our democracy fray, not to let it be undermined. So what we talk about today is both about reflecting who we are as New Yorkers, but also reflecting the values that we have in this city. What do you think of when you think of a thriving cultural community? You think of a lot of creativity. You think of people who have great aspirations and visions of things that have not yet been created. You think of a drive amongst artists and cultural workers that constantly tells them to take risks. That, to me, aligns to everything that's great about New York City. This is a city of risk takers and entrepreneurs and creators, and our arts communities are leading edge. And so we remember that a lot of times when we're needing some more energy, when we're needing some more inspiration, we turn to a play, we turn to a movie, we turn to a concert, we turn to something that uplifts us, gives us back our energy and our hope. And we know that for a lot of our young people, that moment when they started to define their hopes for themselves happened while looking at a work of art or being at a performance. There was that one moment of inspiration that changed their lives. Now, we have to help that to happen for every single child. And we know that in the real world, there are impediments. We know that supporting our cultural community costs money. We know that we have to make sure that there are not barriers, whether they're physical or assumed, that stop people from experiencing the fullness of our cultural sector. And we know that a lot of our cultural organizations have more work to do to reflect the diversity of New York City. And when you think about it, that is really about making sure that everyone can participate, that no one is deprived. You know, we're an egalitarian city. We don't like to see anyone left out. And that's what is so powerful about this plan. It provides so many elements that will strengthen our cultural organizations, but also ensure that everyone gets a chance to experience the inspiration they provide. You know, we don't know where the next great artists are going to come from. We don't know where the visionaries who will frame our future will grow. It could be in Brownsville or East New York, it could be here in Long Island City, it could be anywhere, and that's the point. We have to make that opportunity available everywhere. So that is what this plan is about. It is a heavy plan. Man, CreateNYC. And this has taken a lot of work. You'll hear from Tom Finkelpearl in a minute, but this has really been a labor of love for Tom and so many other people. I don't think there's anything I've ever seen that there was so much work put into listening to people in communities all over the city to understand what they wanted, what they needed, what their vision was. But it's all here, the summation of all of that research, all of that attempt to hear what everyday New Yorkers felt about arts and culture. And it represents a new way of thinking because it puts the notion of inclusiveness at the forefront. There are arts organizations that have been extraordinarily inclusive for years, decades. There are others that have more to do. Certainly some history of elements of the cultural sector being seen as elitist. That doesn't conform with the values of New Yorkers. We want to overcome that. We want every cultural organization to be for everyone. So this extraordinary report you'll hear about is based on literally meetings that included tens of thousands of New Yorkers. And this equates to the approach we've tried to take from the beginning, but it builds on it. You know, one of the things I'm most proud of is when we started out our initiative with IDNYC. There were many good reasons for IDNYC. One of the most exciting parts of it was the notion of opening up the doors of our cultural institutions. And some of you will remember the original projections. I like to remind Tony Shores of this frequently, the ironclad original projection of 100,000 people signing up for IDNYC in the first year. He was off by times 10. It was almost 1 million people we got in the first year and growing all the time. And one of the amazing things, I want to thank all of the representatives of the cultural organizations that participated in IDNYC. There was incredible enthusiasm in the cultural sector to be a part of this. And, you know, the belief was a lot of folks would walk through the doors who had never walked through the doors before, because maybe they came from another borough, maybe they didn't have a lot of money, maybe they were immigrants. But that once they experienced the greatness of these cultural institutions, they would keep coming back. In fact, they would become members of their own volition, and lo and behold, it's happening all over this city. So that's an example of something we started with, but we wanted to build upon it. We wanted to make it something pervasive. We wanted to make sure that no one was excluded, and that included no physical exclusions. We did not want to see anybody with disabilities kept from experiencing the fullness of our cultural sector. And we knew that would take real work. So in this plan, you see investments to make our cultural spaces more accessible. We knew that we wanted to see New Yorkers of all ages, particularly younger New Yorkers, have opportunity to work in our extraordinary cultural institutions. And we knew we had to do more. So in this plan, you'll see a paid internship program that places CUNY students in cultural organizations that hopefully starts them on a great career doing this work. And we know, and this is a classic New York City reality, for generations in New York City, amazing people grew up here or came here from other parts of the country, other parts of the world, because they saw this as the cultural mecca. They saw this as the place to really grow and achieve their dreams. And we all know the history of the quote-unquote starving artist, you know, the artist who, or performer who waited tables. I think you can find a lot of them out there right now in New York City, or drove a cab, did whatever it takes, but they could find a place to live that was pretty cheap, and they could really pursue their dreams. That's gotten harder and harder. And that's both true about living and the place to do the work of an artist. So you'll see in this plan a further focus on affordable workspaces for artists so that this can be a part of New York City to come. In here, a total of $18.5 million in new investments. I want to thank the council. Almost half of that's from the city council, almost half from the administration. And further, a focus on ensuring that our cultural organizations continue to draw in every kind of New Yorker in every way, and that includes who works for them. We believe that a major goal for this city should be to have our cultural organizations represent this city in every way. And we believe it's important to create real measures to help that happen. Remember, approximately 2/3 of the people who live in this city are people of color. But our cultural sector, in terms of the staff of our cultural sector, it's about 38% 38% people of color. And about 26% of senior staff at cultural organizations are people of color. We've got a long way to go. We've got more work to do. And this plan helps us to get there. Starting this year, we're going to openly collect the information on the demographic makeup of boards and staffs of organizations. And we're going to ask them to talk about their vision for continuing to make organizations more inclusive. This will be a factor in funding decisions by the city going forward, because it's important to ensure, if we're investing public money, that these organizations represent everyone and include everyone. And next year, we're going to have a plan to have each cultural organization submit a diversity plan with measurable goals for how they're going to continue to make progress. We do this because we believe in fairness. We do this because we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to experience this work and to experience the art that it produces and opens up to the world. We also do it because we recognize the power of the arts. We recognize the life-changing reality. We have to make sure that reaches as many people as possible. So here in this city, we are proud of our cultural community. We're proud of the energy that's in the air here every day. We're proud that we celebrate diversity. Nowhere do we celebrate diversity more than Queens, the most diverse place on the planet, as I'm seeing this week. And this plan honors that vision of an energetic cultural sector for everyone, and the fullness of New York City being expressed through our cultural community and being open to all. Just a few words in Spanish. Hoy anunciamos un nuevo plan para las artes y la cultura en la ciudad de Nueva York. Por primera vez, este plan le da prioridad a la inclusión en las artes, para que los neoyorquinos, sin importar su origen, pueden crear y vivir el arte. También haremos responsables a las organizaciones culturales, asegurando que sus juntas y personal reflejen la diversidad de nuestra ciudad. With that, it is my pleasure to turn to our partner in this work we've been doing. Again, I want to thank all of the City Council members because they've been great believers in this work. I want to turn to the Speaker of the City Council, Melissa Mark Viverito.
Well, thank you, Mayor de Blasio, and to the First Lady. Thank you so much, and to all of those that are here at the dais, particularly to my colleagues, our Majority Leader and Chair of the Cultural Affairs Committee, Jimmy Van Bramer and Steve Levin, who are the sponsors of the legislation that has gotten us here to this point. It's been indicated, always wonderful to be in Queens with so much, not only diversity ethnically and racially, but also with regards to our cultural institutions. There's a lot of wonderful cultural organizations that that are based outside of Manhattan. And I think that that is also part of the challenge that this cultural plan really places before us, is that we take a look beyond what the standard has been in this city, and really challenge us to support and nurture that talent that is outside of Manhattan. So we know that CreateNYC is going to really open many doors for cultural life in New York, revealing untapped creative potential and new ways of approaching the issue of the 21st century. What is highlighted in the executive summary, and I think it just has really been highlighted by our mayor, is that CreateNYC, at the end of the day, is intended to serve as a roadmap to a more inclusive, equitable, and resilient cultural ecosystem in which all residents have a stake. And as our city continues to grow, it has never been even more important to provide culturally appropriate resources for our underserved communities. Like the First Lady indicated with her personal experience, my interest in the arts was nurtured from a young age. A mother who really instilled in me, as I was growing up in Puerto Rico, curiosity, an interest in the arts, in the museums, in theaters, something that I've carried over in my life. And as a Latina, as a Puerto Rican, arts and culture allows me to feel validated. It allows my history to feel validated. It exposes others to that reality, right? It helps teach other people about the world we live in and the challenges that exist. And so that is why I'm always so eager to look beyond myself and my immediate community, to look at and learn from the theater productions, all the free programming that we offer in this beautiful city. In this past week, I can probably say I've visited 4 or 5 cultural organizations because it's just innate. It's just something that I lean towards, and it's something that I really welcome. So I've been very passionate about supporting arts, not only as a council member in the organizations in my district, and I'm proud to represent the Museum of the City of New York, and also proud to represent el Museo del Barrio, which was an institution that was built and founded on the inability of Puerto Rican artists to see themselves reflected in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, not that it's a wonderful institution, but in the larger cultural organizations where they felt invisible. And so they created an organism, a museum that was founded at the community level so that those opportunities and those artists could be nurtured and could expose and present their art. So I feel very passionately and strongly about this, and we've obviously had incredible leadership from Jimmy Van Bramer, who comes from the same vision, and then Jimmy and Steve Levin working on this legislation. So I'm really proud that CreateNYC came to life after the council passed legislation 2 years ago that required the city to come up with a comprehensive cultural plan. Just in this fiscal year's budget, the City Council has allocated $36 million in expense funding towards cultural initiatives and organizations, and $84 million in capital funding for many of our organizations. So I really want to thank all the sponsors, the hard work pushing this project forward, and look to continue partnership with the Mayor and the Department of Cultural Affairs to make New York a more inclusive city for all. This is very, very important in many ways, and I know that there will be those who resist, those who resent, and those who may try to obstruct what it is that we are doing here. But if we really are the city that the mayor has laid out, then this is something we all have to do collectively and recognize that when we uplift everyone, that we are a better city because of that, particularly in the climate that we live in. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jimmy, as our chair of the Cultural Committee, and to Steve, and really happy to be here today.
Thank you very much. So a huge amount of work went into this plan, and again, thank you to the City Council for leading the way. But the day-to-day work of listening to tens of thousands of New Yorkers and taking their words and ideas and putting into a larger vision fell upon the Department of Cultural Affairs, and they did an extraordinary job. And I want to thank Tom Finkelpearl and all his team, and introduce unquestionably the most popular commissioner in New York City, Cultural Affairs Commissioner Tom Finkelpearl.
Yeah, popular till now, right? So I just want to say it was such an honor to be out and about, to work with thousands or tens of thousands of New Yorkers at hundreds of meetings. In the cultural plan, there are 8 chapters. They relate to equity and inclusion, social and economic impact, affordability, neighborhood character, arts and science education, arts and culture and public space, citywide coordination, health of the cultural sector, and New York City artists. There are plans to roll out that are going to have immediate effect on those, but I think it's a mistake, actually, to just look at this year's budget. This is a visionary plan for the future. This is going to affect everything we do at the agency. So there are action items at the end of the book, but again, it's the entire cultural budget that is at stake here. So we're, again, excited with new funding. I do want to thank the council, to thank a majority leader, to thank the folks that got this law up and running. This is a new day for arts and culture. Again, what happens right now is important. We have action items. This should be judged on what the cultural climate is, what the cultural workforce looks like. In 5 years, there's a check-in, and in 10 years, a new plan is called for. So again, it's been an amazing thing. I see the unions are here. I see that the cultural workers are here, the cultural organizations. We have had a special relationship with a group called Disability Arts New York City Task Force, which Melanie Chaitu referenced. It's extremely important. It's in the plan. We have new staff and new funding related to access to disability arts. We had an amazing relationship with the DIY community and the folks there. You would not think of that as the most organized, but they were one of the most organized parts of New York City. I have to say, they came to meetings, they pushed forward. We already have a nightlife ambassador at another agency, really came out of this cultural plan, but it's going to be over at Media and Entertainment. So we're excited. There's a lot to look at. There's a lot of amazing stuff in this 175-page document. I want to thank the mayor for incredible support. The money that the mayor has added to the last 2 budgets has been so meaningful to the cultural community. I get thanked a lot for it. I want to thank you. Push the thanks upstairs one time. So thank you so much to everybody here. It's an amazing day. I think this is a defining day of certainly my time as commissioner. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well done, Tom. And now turning to Mr. Culture himself, the chair of the Committee on Cultural Affairs and the City Council, Council Member Jimmy Van Bramer. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and First Lady, for being here in the 26th Council District and having this major announcement in Queens. I think it's very fitting. I want to thank our speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito. It's worth noting that this plan and what's going to happen as a result of it would not have been possible without her support. The truth is that the history of this plan goes back to prior administrations when Councilmember Levin and I attempted the first time to pass this plan. We did not have the support of either side of City Hall 4 years ago, 5 years ago when we first introduced it. But I want to thank the Speaker for moving this forward in the City Council and, of course, the Mayor and the Commissioner for implementing it. I also want to note, as the Speaker did, that every year the Council has upped funding for Culture and the Arts, that she's been the speaker and I've been the Cultural Affairs Chair. And together, working with the administration, well over $500 million in cultural capital in the last 4 years alone, and over a billion with a B, since I've been the Cultural Affairs Chair. We're very proud of those numbers. I'm also proud to announce that as part of this package, the $18.5 million in funding that the mayor announced, much of which is city council funding, we're going to dramatically increase funding to the borough arts councils, which will increase the re-grants that go to individual artists directly. As a result of this plan, we know it's important to get more money to artists. Artists should be paid for their work. I also am very, very proud that we're going to increase funding together, working with the Department of Cultural Affairs, to fund nonprofit cultural organizations in all 5 boroughs, with a special emphasis on those organizations with the smallest budgets. It is a good day. I also want to thank, and he'll speak, I'm sure, my colleague Steve Levin. Councilmember Levin has pushed for this for years, and I want to thank him for his work, for his passion and his belief in our community. This would not have been possible without Councilmember Levin pushing all of us to get it done. And while the organization has been lauded, we are here at Materials for the Arts, and the great Harriet Taub, who runs this amazing organization. Harriet and this organization make it possible for so many to produce plays and shows and experience art for tens of thousands of school children in New York City public schools, to have art materials. That happens because this organization exists right here on Northern Boulevard in Long Island City. Thank you, Harriet Taub, for your work.
You get to stay all day and play.
And I'm not going to shout them out as the speaker did in her district, because many of you are in my district or in Queens, but I want to thank all of you who are courageous enough to call yourselves artists and to produce. And now I want to say this from the heart. Belief in the centrality, power, and purpose of culture and the arts is a core value. And when the government of a city as great as ours undertakes and follows through on a cultural plan, we are reaffirming that value. The belief that each of us in a city as wonderfully complex and diverse as ours, one that moves so fast, can be spiritually uplifted and brought to a pause when we see a challenging work of public art, when we see grace in a dancer, or when we hear a voice that strikes a chord deep in our soul. This is who we are. This is what we believe. This is why we live. And this is why we need a cultural plan to keep culture and the arts front of mind in our city at a time when others doubt its worth. Now, just as the belief in culture and the arts is a value, so too is believing that every New Yorker should have equal access to its power, so that each person who experiences it themselves becomes more powerful. That is why I'm so proud of these efforts, to identify barriers to access and challenge ourselves to bring more equity to every corner of every neighborhood. Because if communities who've been marginalized don't feel welcome, or groups in some communities aren't adequately resourced, we need a roadmap and the will to change that. That is what today is all about. And I'll end by saying that I see the power of culture and the arts all the time when I see children experience and create art, when they see themselves reflected in an Alvin Ailey dancer or a Korean marching band, when they pour a part of themselves onto a sheet of construction paper, as they do in PS 111 in Queensbridge, and then see that beauty hung in a school hallway. If this transformative moment, let's each pledge to keep this plan a living, breathing document that affords every child in our city, regardless of race, income, gender, immigration status, ability, orientation, or gender identity, the power of culture and the arts in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well done, council member. I mentioned how much work went into creating this report and this vision, how many folks were consulted with. Well, we had a Cultural Advisory Commission, which was a crucial part of this equation. And now I want to introduce the chair of that commission, Susana Toella Laval.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. Buenos dias. I have been privileged to be part of the DCLA process that generated Create New York City, a cultural plan for all New Yorkers. Based on the most ambitious, wide-ranging cultural survey I have witnessed in my nearly 50 years in New York's art world. During that time, I had the good fortune to participate in the Cultural Institutions Group in various capacities. As a member of the board of the Metropolitan Museum, one of the great museums of the world, and still more important to me, as director of El Museo del Barrio, an organization founded to give voice to the then invisible Latino community. The differences in mission, size, values, and collections between the Metropolitan Museum and El Museo del Barrio are precisely what make New York City's renowned culture so rich. Create New York City plan honors and seeks to preserve our diversity, following the equitable blueprint generated by all of you, cultural providers and partakers, and the many thousands of citizens who participated in the process. I thank Mayor de Blasio and the First Lady, the City Council and their leadership and staff of DCLA, and very much look forward to being part of the next process. Thank you, gracias.
Thank you. Now, we are having an extraordinary experience, all of us who are here as part of Queens Week, but I now want to introduce a gentleman from the largest borough, Councilmember Steve Levin. This is my Brooklyn Pride moment, Steve. I want to thank you for your extraordinary leadership, and I appreciated what Councilmember Van Bramer said about the fact that you two labored when it was not easy, but perseverance is a virtue, so I congratulate you both. Councilmember Steve Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm certainly thrilled to be here today, and I want to thank you, Mayor and First Lady Mccray, for your dedication and obvious passion for arts and culture in New York City. And I'm so grateful that you're here today to celebrate the unveiling of this amazing plan. To our speaker, who has stood by Chair Van Bramer and myself with this legislation, thank you. Obviously, to my colleague, Jimmy Van Bramer, who has spearheaded this legislation and made sure that it was meaningful and that it was going to be implemented in a truly robust way. Jimmy, your passion is truly inspiring. To all of my colleagues in government that have helped put this together, to Deputy Mayor Shores and his team, particularly to Commissioner Finkelpearl. A couple of weeks ago, I was at an event with Commissioner Finkelpearl, and he showed me his schedule for the next day. It was like 9 o'clock at night, and he said, "Well, I got a busy day tomorrow." And I said, "Oh, let me see your schedule." And he had at least 10 meetings the next day, all across the city. And I saw, time allocated for a meeting, travel time. I saw no time allocated for lunch.
He doesn't eat.
And
He just works.
but really, Commissioner Finkelpearl took on, this legislation, which was a mandate to do this, and he took it on with such seriousness of purpose and passion and overall responsibility for this. It was really wonderful to see, and I really appreciate all of the hard work that he and his staff put into this. It's really extraordinary. Thank you. Just a couple of thoughts. In New York City, culture is us. We are culture. It's synonymous. We are nothing without our culture. Our neighborhoods are nothing without their culture. Our history is nothing without its culture. And, it's so ingrained in us that oftentimes we might take it for granted because it is so much a part of our lives. And, if you go back to ancient civilizations, to the Greeks and the Egyptians, culture was part of every civilization. Every civilization that has grown and thrived, Native American civilizations, it has always been a part of who we are as humans. It's how we make sense of our surroundings, of our times, of our circumstances. It's how we make sense of our lives. And we need to consistently feed that source. And we need to protect that source. There are so many forces at work that might be beyond our control, economic forces, massive forces of gentrification that this mayor and this speaker have valiantly set up frameworks to try to guard against and effectively guard against. We need to make sure that we're doing that with our culture. It's that important. If you think back of ancient Athens, what would ancient Athens be if it didn't have Sophocles and Aeschylus, and these great playwrights that help people make sense of their times? And I think in our city, back to 9/11, and who here didn't, in the months after 9/11, see a piece of art or a play or music that helped them make sense, help them figure our way through the darkness. And, that's what art means. That's what art means to everybody. You could be anywhere in New York City, and art and culture is going to help guide you through tough times, happy times. It is a reflection of who we are. And this blueprint, CreateNYC, is a plan to maintain that. It is a blueprint that we can look forward for years and years now from this point forward and say, okay, how do we effectively maintain our arts and culture? How do we protect individual artists? How do we protect small cultural institutions? How do we maintain large cultural institutions? How do we keep this going? Because it is that essential. And so, Mayor, Speaker, Chair Van Bramer, Commissioner, thank you so much. This is a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Thank you very much, Steve. Very thoughtful comment, and very much appreciate your sense of history. I now want to turn to one more speaker, and she has been one of the leading champions for New York City in Albany, and I thank her every time I see her because I can't even count all the great things she's done to help the city of New York, and she's been a key participant already in Queens Week. I want to welcome Assemblymember Kathy Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very kind. I'll just say quickly how proud we are in our district here in Western Queens of our Councilman Jimmy Van Bramer and his great leadership for the arts. He's made us all very proud. I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and your team, First Deputy Mayor and the Commissioner, for having this event in Queens and for supporting the arts, which is so much a part of our great energy here in Western Queens. And I also want to thank Harriet and Material for the Arts. I still have the Triceratops Nicholas made out of the empty film canisters. I treasure it. His elementary school was one of many. As chair of education, I try to support through educational grants the arts as much as we can. But before I became chair of the committee, his own school had access to some of the material here, and it really was the most darling thing. I'm probably going to embarrass him terribly to say that because he's a college student now. But when a child can see empty film canisters and create a dinosaur out of it, that's how you know the arts can be in all of us and can stimulate us and bring such joy to the lives of everyone in our city. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, everybody, for having me today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember. We're going to take questions about the cultural plan, and then I have another update on another matter that I'll offer, and then we'll take questions on all other topics. So first, I want to see if there are any questions about the cultural plan. Grace.
Mayor, I'm hoping you can expand expand on, you talked about how you're going to be asking for demographic information from arts and cultural institutions, and that would be a factor in funding decisions. What does that mean exactly? How much of a factor? Are you looking for improvement? Are you looking for a certain number to be hit? And how quickly in that first year, in this year, will that be an issue that's on the table?
Sure. Thank you, Grace. I'll start and Tom will jump in. You know, in the approach to funding we take on many fronts, many agencies, we include things that we think are important to moving the city forward. So it's very typical to include a variety of factors, and they all get weighed in the mix of what we're doing with the funding decision. We're saying this matters. It's one of the things that needs to be considered. Now, the most important thing from my point of view is that each organization have a vision, a realizable vision for inclusion, for making sure their audiences are diverse, for making sure their staff is diverse. And sometimes that'll take time to actualize, but we want to see that each institution that's asking for public money, obviously asking for taxpayer dollars, is mindful of the fact that we think it's a real value in this city to be inclusive. So it'll be one of a number of factors that will get looked at. Tom can talk about how that will be implemented.
Sure, I could get a little bit more into the weeds. So what we're saying is the first year, we will have a new question on our competitively awarded grants. And the question will be, how does your organization, some version of how does your organization address equity and inclusion? That will be part of the evaluation process for grants through what's called the Cultural Development Fund. Those are grant guidelines that are the trainings are going to start now this month. That'll be discussed in the trainings. The applications are actually in the spring, and that'll be a question which will be taken into consideration in funding considerations by the outside panel that makes those determinations. The first year as well, we will ask for, from grantees, demographic information about their staffs and boards, et cetera. We've done this before in our diversity survey. We did it as a third-party nonprofit. It was paid for by a private nonprofit and done by a private nonprofit at arm's length from the city. This will be done. And then the second year, we will require the Cultural Institution Group to come up with a diversity and inclusion plan for their staffs and boards with measurable goals. So that's three different things we're doing, 2 in the first year and 1 in the second year. That's what the mayor was referring to.
Go ahead.
Just to create a sense of how many organizations come to the city, depend on the city for support. I mean, are these everyone from the largest in the city to the smallest?
Yeah. Okay, so we fund about just under 1,000 organizations. A large part of our funding goes to what's called the Cultural Institution Group. This is an idea that started in the 19th century with the Metropolitan Museum and Natural History. They're on city property. We pay heat and light, and we pay operating support. So what we're saying is that the Cultural Development Fund is about 950 organizations. That's competitively awarded grants. And the Cultural Institution Group is 33 institutions on city property. So overall, it's about, you could say just shy of 1,000 organizations that we fund.
Okay, let's go back first, way back. Who's back there? You, David?
Sure. Just on the same topic, are there other areas where the city bases its funding of organizations on the diversity of the leadership and membership of the organization that's being funded? And then for the commissioner, you said when the mayor was introducing you as the most popular commissioner, you said popular till now. Do you think this initiative is going to make you less popular?
Okay, should I answer that question first? That's a very speculative question. Look, I said it. No. I think that we plan to be very collaborative. We know the Cultural Institution Group is well represented here. Lots of these people are representing amazing institutions. We want to work collaboratively. We have ideas. There are foundations who are quite interested in helping us out with this. Honestly, it was a joke. I'm prone.
I think you're very popular.
I'm prone to making. Maybe that's part of my popularity, is I say things like that off the cuff. But I don't know. I love these institutions. It's my job to love these institutions. It's also my job to work to make these institutions more open and more inclusive.
And David, to I think there's a parallel here to IDNYC, you know, again, ultimately proved to be a great success in terms of experience we had with the cultural organizations. Some were entirely embracing from word one. Some were hesitant. Some were deeply concerned. We got there together. But, you know, change is always a process. We're saying, and I don't think it's exactly a news flash, that we can do better as a city at ensuring diverse audiences and a diverse workforce. So we think this is a way to help move forward that effort. To your other question, we can get you the chapter and verse. We look at a variety of factors in funding decisions traditionally. This is an area where I think, unlike most of what we do, think about most of the things the city does, you know, schools, parks, policing, sanitation, whatever. There's really not the same question about audiences and how they interact with something or engage something. This is an area where we've known for a long time we had to break down some barriers in terms of diversity. We've certainly known we had to break down barriers in terms of physical access to folks with disabilities. The cultural field is its own reality, and we're trying to address that very, very squarely here. But we believe, I think the simplest way to put it, and again, I give the City Council a lot of credit because they've been working on this for years, is this is an idea whose time has come. This is New York City today. 10, 20 years ago in New York City, maybe people would have felt something different. But today, we understand who we are as a city. Again, we're 2/3 people of color. We're, as you heard, almost 10% folks with disabilities. Let's get up with the times and have a plan that reflects New York City today.
This is for the Council Speaker and the Mayor. Council Speaker, you talked about resistance and obstruction. It sounded like you think there's going to be some resistance and obstruction to this plan. Can you give some more specifics on that? Where do you think the resistance and obstruction will come from?
Let's be honest, any movement for equality and inclusion doesn't come easily. And we are going to work collaboratively with everyone. It's not about diminishing the importance of anybody in this process. But I think that we also have to take a more expansive view, a larger, broader view as a city of how we support the cultural movement in this city. And that is looking beyond, I think, what typically has been looked. I think in the past 4 years, as we've, and with the leadership of this mayor and this council, because of our slant and our vision and building an inclusive city, we want to bring more people to the table. We want to bring those smaller cultural organizations that are in the heart of Queens or in northernmost part of the Bronx, into this conversation. And so as you expand that, some people may see that as a threat. I don't think it has to be seen as a threat, but some people may not be as open because they think somehow that will be detrimental to themselves. So it's about expanding the conversation and seeing how this is a benefit to everybody. But I'm not going to sit here and say that we haven't heard grumblings already from people about what this may mean for them. That's the reality of life. Any movement or any attempt by government in particular to build a broader, more inclusive, equitable society will come with some knocks. That's the way it has been historically. And I think we're up for the challenge.
Well said. I agree with the speaker. Let me just respond to your original question. I agree with the speaker entirely in her analysis. I'd like to note further, geography to pick up on the speaker's point, geography is a big factor here. I really give Jimmy Van Bramer credit as a proud son of Queens for relentlessly promoting the idea of investments in outer borough cultural institutions. Tom Finkelpearl, I remember vividly his interview for Cultural Affairs Commissioner, and obviously he had been running the Queens Museum and was a strong protagonist of the notion of seeing culture in the city as a 5-borough thing and not as something primarily focused on Manhattan. And he was very passionate about that, one of the things that made me choose him as commissioner. I see folks here representing each borough, and I know there's been frustration for a long time. During Staten Island Week we heard it, during Bronx Week we heard it. And I certainly know it from my beloved Brooklyn, that there's a lot of organizations that feel there wasn't equality of treatment based on geography, even though the vast majority of New Yorkers live in the outer boroughs. So this was another part of this plan to say, hey, culture takes many forms. It has to reach people where they live. We believe in things like IDNYC for sure that make it easier for folks to access culture across the boroughs, but we also want to make sure funding is really focused on the local cultural organizations that so many people depend on. So that's a big piece of this equation too. Go ahead.
Just to get back to where are the grumblings coming from? Where do you expect resistance to this? The cultural institutions?
Yeah, I'm not speculating on where they're coming from. I think the speaker said it right. Whenever you make change, there's going to be some people who are concerned or resistant. But this process has been outstanding. I mean, the amount of consultation here has been extraordinary. If you look at the facts here, I can't think of anything where I've seen more consultation. And I think for a lot of folks in the cultural world, they understand for years both the council and the administration have been moving in this direction. So I don't think it's going to be a shock to anyone, but there's always going to be some resistance to change. Gloria.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to get some clarity. Are you mandating diversity from some of these organizations? Is the city able to do that in order for them to receive funding?
It's not a mandate. We're making very clear that we believe as people lay out the virtues that they are promoting as the reason to be funded, that this is an important factor to us. Think about any funding application. In the funding application, the applicant puts forward their strengths and why they think that their organization is particularly worthy of funding. And it's obviously competitive. So implicitly, why are they more worthy than someone else? How many people they serve, for example. They serve more people than someone else. That they're providing something that's not available anywhere else. There's all sorts of ways you could think about it. We're saying it's very important to us as we look at a broad spectrum of factors to see that there's a commitment to diverse audiences and diverse staff. It's as simple as that. And having a plan, just having a plan, for example, to achieve that is a big factor to us.
As you speak about institutions that maybe haven't done a great job of reaching out to other communities, is that part of the reason you haven't visited a lot of the bigger art institutions in the city? Do you plan to get out more, or are you going to be visiting the smaller ones in order to drive that?
Do you plan to get out more? I like that. You should get out more, right? Chirlane and I are homebodies. You should get out more, honey.
More hours in the day.
Yeah. We make our decisions about our schedule primarily on what we have to do as a part of our work. And then some of the rest of the time is just recovering from our work. So, but, I don't have a particular plan of which organizations to visit. A lot of members of my team have done a great job working with the cultural organizations. I know spend a lot of time with them. I don't have a particular plan for that. It's all, basically decided week by week, whatever's going on. Jillian.
Like a multi-part question.
Oh, come on, Jillian. Not too many parts.
So to start, you talk a lot about outer borough museums. They're looking for more diversity, and you also, at one point, used the word elitist when talking about how some people see certain cultural institutions. Do you think that some of the larger cultural institutions in the city are elitist?
I think they were. There's no question in my mind that they were both perceived to be and were often, in fact, actually elitist. I mean, it's not, again, a news flash. Some of them were created to be elitist. I think history has had a big impact, meaning even before we got here, a lot of that was changing for sure. Just the expectations in our society were changing. I think we've become a more egalitarian society. And people of all backgrounds have wanted to see more diversity, both, again, in audiences and in the workplace. But there's always more work to do. So I think the consciousness has changed a lot, but there's more work to do. And I think there's a semblance of elitism still. Of course, there's still the assumption among many New Yorkers about where they belong and where they don't belong. This is something Chirlane and I have talked about for the last quarter century or so. That, the perceived barrier is really important here. If people don't feel they belong in an institution of high culture, that's almost the same as if you put up a physical barrier. And we have to overcome that. It's one of the things we're really proud about with IDNYC is it said to people, come on in. And lo and behold, they came on in. And again, the 40 organizations that participated, and we really thank them for that. We said this was going to be a win-win, and I think a lot of them end up feeling very strongly it was, that they got new audiences, they got folks who really felt, okay, this is for me after all. And that was good for everyone. But our job is to say, and think about this for a moment, with the minute public funds are involved, to me it's really important that the thing be for everyone. Our job is to say, whatever you thought it was in the past, now all of these organizations are for you. You know, they're for every kind of New Yorker, and we think this plan will help us achieve that.
Can I just add
Please.
one thing? So I think what the mayor says is absolutely right, that if you look at a cultural institution who was walking in the doors 50 or 100 years ago, and some of these organizations are 145 years old, the education programming that these organizations do, the partnership with the public schools, this is fantastic. And it really is fundamentally, the change is already happening. The change needs to happen more. I think that's what we heard over and over again from our, tens of thousands of New Yorkers in 418 meetings. So we felt it, but we also feel a good partnership and a good willingness. Again, I haven't heard the grumblings yet. I don't know if you've been getting any calls. I have not gotten any calls yet grumbling. I just want to say that transition historically is already underway, and I think that's what the mayor was just saying.
Okay, Jillian, last one in the interest of fairness, then I'm going back. Okay.
You spoke about, the First Lady spoke about subway dancing and graffiti. The commissioner spoke about DIY spaces. But in New York, subway dancing is against the law. DIY spaces are closed all the time, like Shea Stadium, for building violations. There's what some people consider an onerous cabaret law that prevents dancing. How do you balance?
We oppose all dancing and displays of affection. Our new cultural police will be enforcing the anti-dancing program.
Someone with a sign here. How do you balance that desire to maintain the law and to foster art?
I thank you for your 27-part question. Look, I don't think there's a dichotomy there. I think there are lots of spaces where the young people who did subway dancing are now doing it in a place that's legal and appropriate. Same with graffiti that's been used in artistic settings that's appropriate. I'm someone who says, yeah, of course we should take another look at the cabaret law. There are real issues there, and we'll be talking to the council about that. But I would argue to you, if you take the entire environment of New York City and 8.5 million people, this is a very open environment that encourages artistic expression and supports it in ways that I think surpass what happens in most of this country and most of the world probably. So yeah, there's some examples where we still have to sort out competing needs. Like I get it, if someone's on the subway, they may not want a dance performance, right in front of their face at that exact moment of their life. We have to deal with that. But they may love that exact same performance in another place. So it's the kind of balance we strike all the time.
Mayor, the percentage of overall arts funding, how much less will folks in Manhattan and in institutions like the Met be getting under this plan?
I'll start and turn to Tom, and I'm sure Chair Van Bramer as well could speak to this. First of all, one of the things that the chairman said is we've been increasing the pie, and he's been quite adamant about that point. He's kind of one note about more cultural funding. Good morning, more cultural funding. So we've been increasing the pie while ensuring that there was more equity in the process. So I don't think this plan stipulates, I really want to make sure there's not a misunderstanding. It doesn't stipulate here's exactly how the funding is going to go for each borough or each organization. It creates a different vision of where we need to go, and people really do respond to this. And again, I use the IDNYC example. That was not a mandate. You could participate or not participate, but we said we really valued it. We really wanted people to participate, and those that participate realized a great benefit. So this pushes us in the direction of making sure there's maximum borough equity in what we do. You want to speak to it?
Sure. Would you like to speak first? Okay. Yeah, so this is not a budget document that stipulates something like that. This is a document that says, and we did a survey earlier in the year, which was the social impact of the arts, which showed which parts of the city have lower arts and cultural participation and assets. So we want to put assets towards that. That doesn't, it's not a zero-sum game. There's additional money in the budget this year. What the council's done, what we've done, has been to support things that are going to put more arts and culture into those communities. So this is not a document that advocates taking money away from the Metropolitan Museum. I want to say that clearly. You asked that. It is a document that says that we're going to collect demographic information about cultural institutions starting this year. Starting next year, as the mayor said earlier, we're going to ask organizations to show us their diversity and inclusion plan, require them to do that. So that is where we're going, but it is not a redistributive, taking money from this to do that. It is a document that shows where we should be going, and a lot of money this year from the council and from the mayor is holding true to those values. So I don't want to.
So yes, I want to amplify that and also address one of the previous questions that was asked a few times about the resistance and who might be concerned. And quite frankly, Robin and others have written about this, right? There was some concern that we were going to take from others, rob Peter to pay Paul. I've long advocated that we could actually increase access and bring more equity to the system, not by harming anyone, but by adding to the pot and by allocating the new funding in a way that is truly progressive and actually targets smaller organizations. So we believe we have a framework. Both the commissioner and the administration and the speaker and I, that we're going to be able to allocate this $18.5 million, a record year on top of another record year, thanks to the mayor and the speaker and both bodies of government, in a way that makes sure that the cultural institutions group members are well funded, and that we also meet the values and the goals of this plan. And we're going to do that right away by making sure that we are getting funding to each neighborhood through the arts councils, to individual artists, and to small organizations, cultural organizations, nonprofit organizations, everywhere. We can do both, and I believe we are, and we will.
Well said. Yeah.
In which direction do you foresee funding for those kinds of legacies going up or down or staying the same?
I don't understand the question.
Can you predict which direction funding will be going? Is it going to go up or down?
We don't predict funding. First of all, there's going to be a budget process every year. I think the central point here is, as we go forward, we want to see funding that reflects life in all 5 boroughs and reflects all the peoples of the city and maximizes diverse audiences and diverse workforces. By the way, I think there's a lot of cultural organizations, big and small, that have gotten the memo and want to achieve that. So, I think a lot of organizations are going to do quite well under this plan because they recognize it's a healthy vision. Yes?
My understanding was that the increase in the budget was arrived at before the plan, and the plan was not done in response. It was not a response to the plan. Going forward, there seems to be lacking in the document anything binding that would ensure that you continue to increase funding and it becomes dependent on your mayoralty and a good economy. Is there any way in which this will become, somehow build in some insurance that there will be a bigger pie going forward in future years and it's not dependent on your priorities?
If we were not dealing with the dynamics in Washington, I might be able to give you a more definitive answer. So I want to be very straightforward. We're experiencing the great unknown because of the Trump administration. Although I have to say the great unknown, it's sort of like they used to say about the weather in New England, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. It's like if you don't like the legislative situation in Washington, D.C., wait another day and it will change again. So we really, we've seen this on healthcare and we've actually started to see it on the budget, these weird shifts where sometimes it looks like there are going to be massive cuts and massive changes and other times it looks like it's not. But I think it's very fair to say we have to get through this year, this calendar year, both in terms of the federal budget and the quote-unquote tax reform, to understand the shape of future federal funding. There are scenarios where the city of New York could lose immediately, by the end of this year, hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding overall and potentially billions, and then that changes the budget for everyone. think there's more stability, and we'll get a good read after this year, then we can think about there's ways to lock in a bigger vision on funding. But what we can say for sure is New York City has always been generous and focused on cultural funding. This is just part of who we are as New Yorkers for decades. That's not going to change. And this plan presents what we believe is a consensus position of the people of the city who we exhaustively engaged. And I think it sends a message to all the organizations of a good way forward. And it will have an impact, obviously, on how we think about funding. But the good news is, with this now as a guiding light, we can say to all communities there's going to be fairness, and that encourages more funding, honestly. It takes away any concern that funding is not, achieving something for all kinds of New Yorkers. I think this sets up a framework that allows for consistency in funding and eventually greater funding. But first we have to get through the Washington dynamic. Okay, other questions? Way back, way back.
I just can't see you. I think this is for the Commissioner. In the report it says that there are 250,000 participants in the culture.
I just want to confirm, I'm sorry, because I don't know you. Media question, yes?
Just, I wondered.
No, member of the media?
Me?
Are you a member of the media?
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're just taking questions from... my apology. We're taking questions from the media right now. Any other questions on this topic? Who's that hand back there? There you go. I guess that's you, Jillian. Your hand was not very high. I thought it might be.
Just curious, since we're in Queens, and we're talking about African Borough museums, have you been to PS1 MoMA yet?
No. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, we're going to go a quick update. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ross.
Why can't you repeal the cabaret law?
Well, as I said, that we're going to look at the cabaret law with the council. I've never been an expert on the cabaret law, but I've had concerns about it for a while, and I think it's worth a serious look. That as some pieces of it may not make sense anymore, but we're going to have to go through a legislative process. All right, last call on this announcement today. Okay, now I'm going to do a little bit of an update, and then we're going to take questions on other topics. To emphasize my update, everyone hang out, don't go anywhere, it's cool. I am taking off my jacket because the update involves a heat advisory. This is a visualization of the fact that we're about to have a heat advisory. I should get out like one of those fans, a little spray bottle. Okay. The National Weather Service has issued a heat advisory for New York City beginning at noon. So we're right about there. And we'll go to tonight at 8 p.m. Temperatures will be in the low 90s, but the heat index will make it feel like the high 90s at least. And so I want everyone to be aware of an exceptional heat situation. We're asking everyone to remember the basics. Stay safe, stay hydrated, stay indoors. If you don't need to be outdoors today, it's a good day to stay indoors, stay in air conditioning if you can. Check on any neighbors who may be vulnerable, particularly seniors. If you have pets, be aware this heat situation is tough on pets too, so make sure they stay hydrated. We have cooling centers now open as of this morning. If anyone lives someplace where it's too hot and they don't have an alternative in that place, they need someplace else to go that's cool, call 311. And we have cooling centers available all over the city for everyone. And important, just spread the word for people to take it easy today and to be safe. I'm sorry, I've been handed an update. The heat advisory is till 8 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday. So it's on now and goes until 8 p.m. tomorrow. Okay, questions on any other topics? Yes?
Take mass transit, we know you use it. It's a two-part question. I'd like to get your review of the summer of hell track work so far. And then also, as you look at the budget for, obviously it's a state thing, but also a city thing. When you see Governor Cuomo...
Sorry. First things first.
When you see Governor Cuomo, pledge $10 billion for, Kennedy Airport or the Van Wyck, do you think the budget should be reallocated with this emergency in mind?
Great question. I appreciate it. The quote-unquote summer of hell is, we're only days into it, and I think it's fair to say it's been less bad than feared, but we've only just begun. We're talking about the stuff related to Penn Station. Obviously, some of the incidents we've had nothing to do with Penn Station, so we've had some very troubling incidents, but not as much related to the Penn Station changes early in the equation here. I've said many times there's a crisis right now going on with our subways. It's quite clear. And we need to do things differently, and that means the state, the governor, the MTA have to come up with a plan that reallocates their resources to the problems at hand. We know what they are. We know it's the signal systems. We know it's the electrical systems. We know it's the real basic stuff that needs to be addressed. And I think it's unquestionably true that resources in the MTA budget are going to things that are less vital than those problems and need to be reallocated to address those problems. So that's just within the MTA budget. I haven't gotten as far as thinking about whether you'd have to look at some of those other things you mentioned, which are important. Every one of them is important. The airports are obviously important. I think the first question is, within the huge MTA budget, what can the state do to fix the problem with the money it has right now and to focus on its number one mission within the MTA, which is the subways by a lot? You're talking about the overwhelming majority of riders in the MTA go on in New York City subways, but that's not how the budget is structured. So I've said, this is the time to see a plan from the governor and from Chairman Lota that reallocates those resources and creates real change in the MTA. And I've said very clearly, I'm fully hopeful they'll do that. And if they don't, we will offer our own plan of how that can be done.
Come out and say you could be doing a better job, or putting you neck and neck with the governor. What's your reaction to that when you know that the state controls it?
The governor controls the MTA, the state controls the MTA. More and more people are understanding that, and they're demanding answers and they're demanding results. And that's what I've been hoping for, because the MTA, as you know, was built to be kind of this amorphous entity where no one knew quite who was in charge, and to insulate it from public opinion. It shouldn't be insulated from public opinion. The public should hold the leadership accountable. In this case, it means the governor and Chairman Lota. And I think that's the best way to get results. That's what I experience all the time in terms of things that I'm entirely responsible for, like schools and policing. So that's what I hope will come out of all this, a clarification of who's in charge and the accountability that should come with that. It doesn't surprise me there's confusion, because the whole thing was built to be confusing. That's just the reality. But more and more, I think people are saying to the governor and to the state, show us a plan. I think that's right. I think that's healthy. Yes.
Kind of touching on that, Lota mentioned yesterday the idea of potentially banning certain foods on the subway. Do you have any opinion on that?
I do. I'm living this particular life now, but from 1979 to 1999, I did not own a car and almost exclusively got around by subway. It would have been in those years inconceivable not to be able to eat on the subway, just because of life, because we're all incredibly busy in this city, because the time on the subway is often the only time you have to eat. And, I don't think it's fair to people to say you can't eat on the subway. I think it is right to say we've got to figure out how to stop the track fires from the trash on the tracks. I talked to Joe Lota about this. I think that's a real concern, and we've got to think about both education and maybe a different kind of enforcement to get people to stop throwing their trash on the tracks, because talk about something that's going to come back to bite you. If someone throws trash on the tracks, end up with a fire, and their own train's not going to come for them. That doesn't make any sense. So I think we have to educate people and create some more enforcement. I think we have to, in a lot of ways, encourage people to not be sloppy when they're on the subway. But I can't imagine personally the idea of people not being allowed to eat on the subway in a place as busy as this. Yeah.
I think on Monday you said that you plan to take public transportation while you're in Queens. I'm wondering if you've done that, and what your plans are, what you took, what that experience was like. And additionally, following up on that, there was an editorial in the Daily News calling on public officials, including yourself, to spend relying much more on subways and buses to get around, just so that it ensures that politicians, people in positions of power, understand what New Yorkers are going through on their commutes every day.
So I, of my own volition, took the 7 train at rush hour going into Queens. And I mentioned to some of you that I used to live in Flushing, so I spent 2 years with the 7 train as my lifeline. And the 7 train was really crowded back in those years. It's really, really crowded now. And we had the sardine can type situation when I was going out to Citi Field. And I'll keep taking mass transit while I'm here and after. I think the bottom line is it's good to take mass transit. It's good to stay in touch. I think there has to be a cognizance of a lot is demanded of us as public officials, and we got to strike a balance. I just think that's the honest truth. It's very good when I'm on the train to get a sense of what people are experiencing, and it's very good to talk to people. I also know when I'm in the car, I'm usually on a conference call or, reading a memo or whatever it is that's part of my work. So a balance has to be struck. I think that's the honest truth. But I've always taken the subway throughout all elements of my public service, and I intend to keep doing it on a pretty regular basis. Okay, going back, first back.
What do you make of Hire Montserrat City Council did? You were colleagues with him. Are you supporting Sequoia? Do you think he should be a city councilman?
I have real concerns about Mr. Montserrat and the things he's said and done, but I'll speak to that race more in the coming days. Jillian?
Mayor, just to be more specific about the MTA and the state's budget, do you think that the MTA or the state should be spending money on light shows on MTA bridges, given the current...
On what?
The light shows.
What light show?
The governor has been promoting these, they're like laser light shows on the Kosciuszko Bridge and a few others on the Verrazano. I take it they're kind of expensive and they're supposed to promote tourism to go look at the bridge with the lights on.
Look, I'm really glad we have a new Kosciuszko Bridge because, again, I also spent a period of my life driving, and I lost a lot of my life on the lead up to the Kosciuszko Bridge. I like those years back. But look, right now, the simplest way to put it is this. MTA should look at everything it does and shift money and energy and resources to fixing the subway crisis in New York City. So I don't know enough about what's happening with the light show. I can tell you that people who ride the subway are not interested in the light show. They're interested in getting the trains to run on time, and they're interested in being able to get to work. And that's what we should focus the resources on going forward. And that's why I keep saying, just give us a plan to do that. That's what I'm asking of the governor and Chairman Lota. Give us a plan to take the billions of dollars in the MTA operating budget and the billions of dollars in the capital budget and reorient it to fixing the subway system. It's pretty straightforward. Rich.
Mr. Mayor, I know that you've been asking for this plan for weeks. How long are you prepared to wait? I mean, until you have said, I think, that the city then would come up with its own plan.
Yeah, look, I think a few more weeks is fair, but not a lot more than that. A few more weeks would be my answer. That's how long I'm willing. I've had good conversations with Chair Lota. I believe he's working diligently. Obviously, he hasn't been there long, but it's time, as we get into August, I'm going to want to see something. Gloria?
So to follow up on Jill's question, we have light shows on bridges, phone chargers on buses, Wi-Fi at train stations. Do you think the governor has placed too much focus on cosmetic fixes and upgrades rather than fixing the basics of what can keep the system running?
Yeah, we have to recognize that those things are really good, but they're good if the basics of the system are working, and obviously they're not. So I would never want to take away from efforts to improve the quality of life once you're on a subway, but much more important is, does that subway ever show up? And does that train ever come, and does it get you where you're trying to go? So I would say those are good things, but they're not the priority. Yeah.
Nicole Malliotakis demanded today she put enough oil. She wants to see expense records for your out-of-city travel. Do you plan to put out those records and make them public?
Everything is based on the same standard for the last 3.5 years of the NYPD. And I entirely respect the judgment of the NYPD in how they provide information related to security and what they choose not to provide. There's a reason for that, and I respect that reason, and it's been the same approach for 3.5 years, so we'll continue with that approach. Last call. Going once, going twice. Thanks, everyone.